And it's been another turbulent week at Man United, but we have actually got a point. We didn't lose like I've thought we would against Everton. A 2-2 draw at Goodison Park, the last time Manchester United will play Everton at Goodison Park, with 70 minutes worth of dross before Bruno Fernandes initiated a much needed comeback, which actually, in terms of a point in this type of game, in where we are in terms of how we're playing, for Ruben Amorim, that might be one of the biggest points he's ever got, because losing that game, on top of how badly we've been playing, would have been an absolute catastrophe. Of course, we're going to welcome in Alex Crook and Angelina Kelly from talkSPORT. Now, listen, guys, let's get straight into this. Crookie, there's so much to get into in terms of, the blame game and the players performing badly. Ruben Amorim said we didn't exist in the first half. Is that a fair assessment? And how did you break down the game?
Yeah, I've seen it described as the worst Manchester United performance in living memory. And I think it's right up there, although the performance level seems to get worse by the week. This is not about ability. There is some ability in that team, as they showed in the second half when the chips are down. This is purely about attitude and application and a desire and a commitment and a willingness just to do the basics. They didn't do any of those for the first hour of the game. And I've got to say, I was so infuriated with the performance that I couldn't even allow myself a little fist pump for either goal.
Yeah, that's exactly
how I was so angry. Yeah. It just sort of washed over me that United came back to draw 2-2, and then they get out of jail right at the end with that penalty. I laid a blame for that firmly on Onana. Yeah, I don't know what he's doing, pushing that ball right back out into the penalty area. It causes panic amongst his defenders, and I think we got away with one. Ashley Young has made a meal of it. He's dived, but there was contact, and I was surprised that the referee overturned his on-field decision. So, yeah, it's a point gained, but the performance left so much to be desired, and very few players came out with any credit. I thought we only really looked like we were going to get back in it when Garnacho came on and started being a bit more direct. I thought Lenny Yoro did well because Mazraoui, in keeping with his recent form, had a bit of a nightmare before he was taken off. Maguire and De Ligt were dreadful. Onana, as I've already mentioned, was terrible. Højlund, again, it was one of those games where he just completely bypassed him. We looked leggy in midfield, so there was so much wrong with the performance.
Everything wrong, basically.
We nicked the point, at least Dick Turpin wore a mask, as the saying goes.
Yeah, and for you, I mean, firstly on the performance, how did you see it, and Bruno Fernandes as well, because we've got to talk about him. He's someone who divides so much opinion in the fan base. There's some people who absolutely love him and get what he brings to the team. And there's others who can't wait to see the back of Bruno Fernandes and think that he's a major part of what's wrong in terms of how he plays the game. How do you see, the performance and, start that discussion on Bruno Fernandes?
Yeah, the performance was bleak, wasn't it? I mean, I think the only positive from the first half was that it was 2-0, because it could have been more quite easily. And I think coming away with a point, I had the same feeling, like it felt like a miracle that we'd actually got a point from it. I didn't even feel like there was anything to celebrate. And like we always say, you want to walk away from a game with something positive. And apart from, like Rookie said, Garnacho coming on, things starting to improve a little bit, I think people are grasping at straws, kind of saying, oh, but turn it around in the second half. It shouldn't even be in that situation to begin with. I know that Everton have had a great bounce with David Moyes and things are really clicking for them, but we should not be putting ourselves in these positions, and that's what really frustrates me about it. But it was just no attacking intent. It seemed like there were no ideas. The energy was flat. It was just so frustrating on every single level. Talking about Bruno Fernandes, though, we've all probably had our doubts about him. I think everyone's had a moment where they've been like, is this the guy for Man United? We talk about his behaviour on the pitch, did his shoe come off against Arsenal or not? All that type of stuff. But I really like the guy. I think I'll always root for Bruno Fernandes. I think, he was, part of the reason why we, obviously he got the goal. He's part of the reason why we managed to get a point. There's so much in the media at the moment that's negative about Man United, especially with Ineos, that, we're all aware of. But, these stories that keep getting leaked out, moments where Bruno Fernandes has really shown he has that captain mentality off the pitch, of him offering to help with the Women's FA Cup final, of families being able to get there and get tickets, etc. Things like when staff weren't allowed to, get accommodation and travel, etc. He's offered to try and step up to the plate. Things like that to me, fair enough, it's not on the football pitch, but things like that matter to me because that shows that he cares and that he does, to an extent, understand the assignment of being a Manchester United player, a Manchester United captain. I do think that he has what it takes to play in those number 10 roles. Amorim's put him in a couple of different positions, and you can just see that he's at least trying his best with it. It might not be perfect all the time, but the intent is there. And how many players can you actually say have got that intent and that try and that fight? There's not many.
Yeah, Crookie, for you, I mean, do we need to be careful that we're not trying to hound out the wrong guys? We're not trying to attack's probably a strong word, but over criticize the wrong players, because last time I checked, when Man United have been this poor, it's been Bruno Fernandes, through good, for bad, or for worse. I understand that in general performance, but he finds the goods. Like, we were in the pits of hell right now, but where would we be without the contribution of Bruno, who's reached double figures for goals and assists yet again?
I think we'd be serious relegation candidates. And actually, the only reason we're not serious relegation candidates is because those 3 teams that came up from the Championship are so poor. But yeah, I mean, he divides opinion because of the armband. And actually, I think if you take away the armband, he is United's best player. And I think the reason he gets frustrated, and maybe you shouldn't get frustrated as captain, is because of the lack of quality around him, the lack of commitment around him. So we all share that frustration. His attitude would probably the same as ours. Actually, a former Arsenal player had to check on me. I was at the Emirates on Saturday, and he said, "You've just spent about 10 minutes walking around the press room shaking your head."
That's how disappointed you was.
Where I was at.
Angry.
So I think Bruno is the saving grace, really. And I think Garnacho can be that saving grace. It seems to me that Garnacho has become a bit of a conundrum for Ruben Amorim because he doesn't really know what he is or what he wants him to do. But he's got quality, and he showed that. I thought it was really unfortunate that he lost his place in the starting lineup. When you look at Rasmus Højlund and how badly he's underperformed, 16 games now without a goal. I'd stick Garnacho as a number 9. I really don't think he could do any worse. Give him a go.
I think with Garnacho, I think what's happening with Garnacho is that he's almost being a victim of his own success when coming off the bench. And I think when you have no Ahmad, we've never really had Mason Mount. Xerxes been on his way to get some form or whatever that looks like.
He's playing quite well. I mean, that run that he
had,
had,
exactly. He's becoming a bit more dependable, isn't he? But with Garnacho, he's doing his best work coming off the bench and changing the game, because he does have that dynamic when players are tired or a bit fatigued, and you want to change the outlook of the game. When you have him on, there isn't really anyone else on the bench you can bring on who can have that type of impact. If you bring on a Joshua Xerxes, okay, against Arsenal, he did do that, to be fair, but in a different way. But bringing on Højlund, you're not going to get that. There is no Ahmad. Bruno's ever present between the 6 and the 10. And it's like, he's like the best impact player. Bringing on Eriksen, depending on what type of game, you're not really going to get that type of impact. I know he came on against Southampton, actually, and provided a great assist for Ahmad to actually get the winning goal. Then he went on to score another, but he's not really that guy. So I think that he's the only sort of explosive, dynamic, quick player you can bring on who can change a game. And then when we've seen him start, sometimes you go, oh, he hasn't quite grasped it. But you're right, Crookie. He's got ability, and he's one of few who, when he gets the ball, you think that something can happen. Just on Bruno Fernandes, I just think when he wasn't the captain, we have to just cast our minds back. It was Harry Maguire, and we were all screaming for him to not have the armband. And you looked around that changing room, you looked around that squad, and there was only one obvious candidate. Only one. You weren't going to give it to Dalot. You weren't going to give it to Luke Shaw. You weren't going to give it to Wan-Bissaka at the time. You weren't going to give it to Lindelof, or a young Ahmad who doesn't play, or a Marcus Rashford who's up and down, or a Sancho, or who was we going to give it to? Martinez was fairly new at that point, but now look at the big injuries that he's gone on to have. There was no clear and obvious. Sound like talking about VAR then, but there was no obvious candidate for, or actually Bruno was the most obvious. He was the people's choice, and I think now he is. People are now getting frustrated with him because everyone's fixated on the captain. But again, whether he's got the captain's armband or not, he still finds a way to have a say in games. And as we've seen, Marcus Rashford out the door, playing absolutely brilliantly at Villa. Players don't always do that. They don't keep their levels high, even amongst the dross. And for me, performance, it was just so alarming. The game went exactly how I thought it would go for 70 minutes. I said would lose 2-0. They would work harder than us. They would work more consistently than us, and they take the chances. And you're right. I mean, Crook, what you're saying about Onana, he did it for the first goal as well. Sorry, second goal as well. Where he's palmed it up in the air, almost like a netball spike. Like, what are you doing? Harry Maguire, absolutely calamitous in that run of play. Couldn't play a high line, couldn't sort his feet out quick enough, gets back in, gets turned by Jack Harrison, can't get up quick enough for the header, gets dominated by Decore. Absolute calamity for him. Delict, just on the ball, he's just not good enough on the ball. Competent defender, but still areas in his game that really, I think Dorgu as well, actually. I think we should give him some praise. I think Dorgu was quite good. Ruben Amorim's first signing, and no sort of surprise, Crookie, that Dorgu's looking all right, and that's someone that Amorim is actually earmarked for this system.
Yeah, and it's all about the system, isn't it? I mean, again, at half time, and I'm trying to stick with Amorim and what he wants to do, but it's hard. You must have it as well when you're getting fans from rival clubs saying, well, is this geezer the real deal? Why is he so attached to this system? Surely the sign of a good manager is that you get the best out of the tools at your disposal. If
do you agree with that,
changing systems?
Do you agree with that, or do you think this is a bit more nuanced? Like, the squad's been so bad, it needs a massive reset, and it's better to do this now than change for players who have failed before? Or do you think, no, in the meantime, you have to change it?
No, I'm coming down on the former. As long as Ineos are committed to that and aren't going to be influenced by negative results, and we've seen they do make knee-jerk reactions. They did it with Dan Ashworth, so I think that has to be a concern when you look at the lack of wins. But they knew what they were getting with Ruben Amorim. He made it pretty clear. That's why I understand Liverpool went for Arne Slot and not him in the summer, because they felt that their squad wasn't suited to the way he wanted to play. And United didn't think it was either. I've told you before that he was offered to United in the summer and they said no. So I think they've got to see it through. And also, because he's been so forthright, he said publicly, I'm not changing. This is the way I want to do it. If he does change now, he falls into that trap that previous managers have. He'll lose authority in a dressing room.
Does he have any now?
I think he does. I think he does. I think you look at what he's done with Marcus Rashford. I was speaking to someone close to the situation with Rashford last night, and it was Ruben Amorim's call. He decided quite early that Rashford's attitude wasn't right and he needed him out of the football club. So he's made an example of him. He's not afraid to make bold substitutions in games or leave players out. So I think he has got authority in the dressing room, and it's absolutely imperative for the future of the club that he keeps that authority, because as soon as you lose it, they're going to chuck you under a bus, these players. They've done it to numerous managers in the past.